The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Howdy ho, everybody. Coming to you cordless. It's Monday night, March 30th, 2026. I'm Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 331, if you're marking your scorecards at home. Our guest is our old friend, Bill Walton, who's joining us. I'm going to put him on the screen right now. He's sliding in from outside of Washington, D.C. I thought I'm going to read, Bill, I'm going to read a few of your credits here. So people know that you're legit. You were the former chairman and CEO of, was it Allied Capital, right?
Allied Capital, yeah.
You led President Trump's 2016 financial agency transition team. You've produced two films that were both inserted into Cannes.
One aired at Cannes, the fancy French festival, and the other one, Tribeca, the New York festival. That was, was a big deal.
And you're the host of the Bill Walton podcast. You're also you were a vice chairman of CPAC, and this is dear to my heart. You were the former president of the National Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah,
I was involved in that business for many years. So
good.
I don't know if I ever told you that.
No, but it's I loved it. It was every Thursday night listening to some amazing music, and I think everybody ought to do it. It kind of gets you out of day-to-day concerns.
Yeah, and it's been I just checked. It's been a good 8 months since you've been on with us. So I appreciate you coming back. So we were talking here before we went on the air about the fact you wrote a piece for Blaze Media. I'm going to put it on the screen here right now. Trump acted first, and the experts are furious because it worked. And this has gotten a lot of readership. Do you want to talk about this?
Well, it's a piece that I put up because I think I had a couple of objectives with it. One was to do a better job explaining Donald Trump than I think people have done. And since I've worked with him and know lots of people who are working with him right now, I've got fairly good insights. And then I also wanted to explain why it was important to move when Trump did to decapitate the leadership of Iran, along with Israel, and really to, I think, contrast Trump's style with most of the style of everybody else in Washington, the political class, the deep state, hold
on. I'm going to stop you for a second. Here's a difference in style. He does something that most other people don't. You're a former CEO. You know how this works. He actually does something. Most people don't do anything.
Well, and that's what I write about. Everybody in this town talks about writing papers and circulating papers and, getting the right councils together and have lots of meetings and on and on and on. And when I was running the transition in 2016, the other guy, we were in his office when transition, and then you look at the resumes and they're all very important sounding, lawyers, policy tanks, things like that. And he says, so what do you don't see here? And I said, well, I don't know, you tell me. And he said, nobody that in the stack has actually achieved anything. They've had jobs, they've had positions, but they can't point to anything that they actually brought about. And you compare that to Donald Trump with, I don't know how many resorts and office buildings and residential he did done over the last 50 years, but that's an achievement. And then how many people go on from that and launch a highly rated, if not the top rated, reality TV show for what was almost a decade that he held that position. And and then the man gets elected president of the United States twice, not consecutively, but he had to start all over for Trump 2.0. And it shows a kind of ability to get things done that I don't see it anywhere else in the political class, and that's why I'm such a supporter. But he sometimes he should talk a lot less. I mean, he's his own worst enemy when it
Right.
comes to conveying what
Well, I think if you asked him about that, I'd love to interview him someday. But if you asked him, I'm guessing he would say, "I keep doing this because it seems to work." And I can't necessarily argue with that.
I can't either.
You're a CEO. I mean, this is what I've learned about entrepreneurs, and I've done a little of this myself. And that is number one rule: if something works, you keep on doing it till it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the rule.
Most of the times things don't work.
Right, don't work. So that's why when you latch on to something,
when you get something, you grab it and
you run with it. That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly the thing. So I don't know a single Trump supporter, myself included, that doesn't think the president talks smack half the time. I mean, he just does.
Well, talking smack is part. You're right. It's a strategy, and it's worked. It's worked for 60, 70 years. So he's not going to stop now.
Well, this is actually one of my problem with. I'd like to say, my reaction is actually liberals, but no, it's like you said, it's everybody in the political class, and it's actually everybody in, I would say, most people in America, and that is people don't pay attention to stuff that actually works, because a lot of the stuff that works is counterintuitive. I mean, you're a big business guy. I've always said the problem with the invisible hand, people can't grasp it because it's completely counterintuitive. You think it shouldn't work.
That's the problem. I mean, it's the seen and the unseen. I mean, politicians talk to you about the stuff you see and they're going to fix it, but it's the unseen stuff. It's the stuff under the hoods that really drives the economy. I mean, I think that's exactly it.
Yeah.
You nailed it. But it's hard to explain that.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. That's my point.
It's not a stump speech.
No, it isn't. It's very hard to explain it, So I'm sorry, I actually interrupted you. So what was your piece about again?
Well, let's just do some of the detail in it. I jump right into the fact that I think a couple things that characterizes Donald Trump is that, number one, he's undeterred by risk, and he's undeterred by taking on big things. And most people are intimidated by something big and something risky. He's not. And he will do it. He'll do some calculation about, upside and downside. But if he thinks the upside's greater, he will move ahead. And that's very unusual, particularly in politics, particularly here in Washington, and even in big corporations. Most people don't want to take risk. Second thing is he's great at improvisation. And you have to be great at improvisation, because if you take risk, you get out there and all of a sudden things aren't working exactly the way you'd hope they'd work. So you've got to change on a dime and go a different direction, maybe with different people and different strategies. And so his ability to improvise is a strength. And it makes people crazy here in Washington, because they want to see a plan, and a 5-year plan or 2-year plan, and they want it all worked out. But what did Napoleon say? That a battle plan doesn't survive the first shot, because everything changes and you gotta adapt to the new reality. He's great at that.
Yeah.
And so I think we're seeing that with Iran. I mean, the thing that triggered this, and I'm not sure I have all the details, but my understanding is that he and Netanyahu, the Israelis have been inside Iran for years, and they've got, I don't know how many thousand people as operatives in there, and they also hacked into the Iranian tech information systems, and they hacked
every single traffic camera in Tehran, supposedly.
Well, yeah, and it's not a traffic camera, but it was also surveillance of the people. Yeah. And so they had thousands of cameras, and the Israelis were tracking the movements of the leadership of Iran, minute to minute, and they were watching this. And then, as I understand it, they came up that they saw this fearless leader who was fearless leader, the supreme leader, who was having a meeting with all his top people in daylight and in a place that wasn't that secure. And so they said, look, we're never going to get a shot at this guy like this. We've got to act. We've got to act now. And that's what they did. And there's few people that would, that would have done that. And so, and so we did it. We decapitated him. We got rid of the top 40, 50 people. I think we worked our way through the second tier. Now we're on the third tier. The problem, of course, is that almost everybody in that government is a fanatic, and they're, they seek martyrdom, and they're totally willing to do whatever is necessary to obliterate Israel first and the United States second. So we're now talking about negotiations, but I don't even think they know who to negotiate with in Iran. Anyway, so that was a bold move, and you couldn't tell anybody you were going to do it. And I can't think of any other president who would have done that. And so here we are. I mean, we're right in the middle of it now, and it's a close thing. I mean, I think both sides, political sides in this country, I mean, the Democrats are claiming it's a failure. Iran's going to win. And, people who are supportive of Trump say, no, stick with the plan. He's going to get things done. The pundit class is going crazy with different interpretations of everything. And as usual, they have very little hard information to work with. So in some cases, they're just making a lot of stuff up.
Yeah, so I don't understand how at this point Iran could win. The only thing that I could see that's really in the balance right now is whether the regime still controls the government. I mean, we have wiped out so much of them, the regime, and so much of their military capacity. I don't see any way they can quote unquote win. Do you?
No, they can't win, but they can win by not losing.
Right. That's right. Exactly. You well put. Right. Yeah.
That's their strategy. They're going to rope a dope. They're going to hide. And then also they're being intimidating because we believe they have enough missiles or drones or whatever's in the arsenal to hit some really terrible targets, the desalination plants across the water in the Arab countries. And of course, if you take out the desalination plants, I've got to practice repeating that or pronouncing that. It shuts those societies down because they've got no fresh water and they've built up this incredible infrastructure that depends on these treatment plants. So that's sort of the ultimate card that Iran has to play. Of course, if they play it, then it's going to really collapse not just the Arab states, but it'll collapse Iran as well. So it's really a suicide mission.
Talking about how this all started, and I keep harping on this show because it doesn't get enough press. The fact is that the reason this whole episode basically started is because the Real collapsed, their economy collapsed, and they have no water.
Yeah.
The city of Tehran basically has no water. So you have people who have no water and they may have a job, but they're not getting paid any money anymore. Why not going out in the street and protest? You got nothing else to do.
They don't have the guns.
Yeah.
The government's got all the guns. I mean, that's
right.
The thing about gun control this is exactly why, we're fighting for Second Amendment rights, because they have no ability to go out and do anything because they don't have weapons, and the leadership killed 32,000, 40,000 of them just 8 weeks ago. And, so I think they're waiting for a signal that it's safe to come out. We haven't gotten that. But yeah. I also think I spent yesterday a few hours studying the map of the Middle East. I really hadn't done that enough. And you look at the political map and you see these lines and you see these countries and how they're adjacent to each other. But if you look at a topographic map, it's amazing because Iran is incredibly mountainous. And one of the things about their shoreline is it's almost, 1,200 kilometers or 1,200 miles of cliffs. And so the idea that you could launch an amphibious invasion, like a modern version of D-Day. It's just not going to happen. You can't get anything in there. So our ability, even if we wanted to put boots in the ground, and we don't, I don't know how you do it. There's no way to, there's no way to effectively marshal enough of the mechanic of, the transportation resources you need to get people into the country.
Well,
So
forgive me though. The president, and I personally think that the Americans obviously do not want boots on the ground. But if you're going to grab this uranium, I don't see at some point you have to do that. I think the president has just been appeasing the public by saying we're not going to do it. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I think there's a lot of truth to it. But I think again, it gets back to the risk profile. If he thinks there's a high probability that we could make that work, he would. This uranium, as I understand it, is in like 60 or 70 or 80 tanks that look like, oxygen tanks for snorkelers, things like that. And it's in a few locations. People speculate about whether they've been moved, but it's pretty hard to move uranium. And so there's about 800. I don't know. There are two types. There's one they've got about 800 pounds, and another one 200 pounds. And it's a very, very precise thing. If the Israelis actually have a lock on where it is and how it's protected and so on and so forth, I think there's a chance we'd go for that. But I think there's no chance whatsoever that we're interested in a forced regime change like we tried in Iraq and bring in 500,000 troops and see. It would be a bloodbath. And I know Trump. I don't think there's any chance that he would be for that. He essentially has not said. He's not talking about we're going to create democracy in Iran. We're not going to change their culture. He just wants to make them less dangerous,
right, and
neuter them. And if he can do that, and as a plus, we can get better leadership there. That would be a great outcome. But if we don't even get the better leadership, if we neutralize them, if we neuter them, if we keep them from conducting war, then I think we win.
Right. Let me run another idea past you too. Everyone's saying that the reason Iranians are negotiating with us is just to buy time like they usually do. I think that the reason we're negotiating with them is actually we're buying time. I don't think that Trump is unless he gets literally every single thing he wants, which he won't, and he knows that. No. I think the reason that the administration is doing this is so they can get all their military ducks in a row to actually do the uranium operation. That's what I personally think, but what do I know?
I think that sounds right. I had a different title for my Substack piece. I put the piece up on Substack as well, and my title there, I think, was Trump, Iran, and the Coalition Against Victory. And so he's not fighting just the Iranians, but he's also dealing with all the domestic enemies in Europe and everybody else who wants to see Trump fail.
Yeah.
And Trump derangements become an incredible national security risk because we've got people, because of Trump derangement, they want him to fail. But if he fails, America fails. And
that's the problem. I don't understand. This is beyond logic, beyond rationality to me. I don't understand what's going on.
Well, go ahead.
No, I got nothing. Except I was going to ask you about the all no kings thing, which is basically the public version of that. I mean, we have people there's people who do anything to see Donald Trump succeed at anything. It doesn't matter, and this war included.
Well, that's the derangement piece of it, and there's a disconnect. I think we've seen an awful lot of hate America coming up through our curriculum and K-12 education and colleges, obviously. And it's not just recently. This has been going on for decades. And if you look at a history book, Howard Zinn's the most notorious.
Right.
You read his history of America, you'd think we were the worst country that ever existed on the planet, and we'd done everything bad. But that's what kids are reading. And so you get people get educated like this, and all of a sudden they're not sure that America is a good country. and they're not sure America is worth defending. And that's a criminal offense in the part of education establishment. But that's nevertheless what we're dealing with, and I think that's why you get a no King's March, because they don't even know how different our Constitution is, from what they'd have if they had their own king.
These people who protested this weekend, do they even know what they're protesting? That's
No.
the part I don't understand. It's like a catch-all, just, we hate Trump and therefore we're going to just bitch about everything,
Well, and they show up and they're handed a sign that's produced by George Soros or whomever's the latest.
Although I did notice something. Did you notice something this weekend? They're using less pre-printed signs, because I think they finally figured out that people are figuring out that the pre-printed signs mean that yeah. Right. Although they're still using them. And now the pre-printed signs, they're actually putting the names of their organizations on the bottom of them, which I find kind of funny, but
Well, yeah, well, it's organized, and it is organized in a very systematic way, and they're gonna. So anyway, Trump is up against that, and I think the issue is that it's sort of like if Pearl Harbor, or we get into Pearl Harbor, we're fighting World War II, and FDR's got opposition, and they're tapping their foot and they're saying, well, look, this war's been going on for 3 or 4 weeks. When are you going to wrap it up? I mean, it's if you're doing anything major, it doesn't happen quickly. But again, I think that gets to one of Trump's flaws, is that he gave people expectations that this would be over a lot sooner than I think it will be. And he hadn't set people up for a longer conflict. And I think that's working against him right now.
Well, I got to admit, I didn't know going into this, the Iranian military, to me, basically doesn't seem very smart, but they do have a lot of resources, way more than I thought they did. And that's, there's 93 million people living there. So I suppose that maybe that's kind of to be expected, but I did not expect them to be that powerful. I really didn't.
1 million soldiers.
Yeah.
And that's why when you have someone talking to somebody earlier this morning who's saying, well, we're going to really change things because the Kurds are going to come in from the north, and they're going to be the other enemy of Iran. And of course, the Kurds hate them, and they'd love to do that. I said, well, how many troops do they have? Well, they've got 15,000. Well, you're not going to make any change in a country as enormous as Iran is, and has 90 million people with that side of force. And I don't think there is any force anywhere in the region that would come even close to what Iran's got in there. But again, it gets to how strong their leadership is in the military and how loyal they are to the government. And, that 1 million men could be a big liability for them if they get significant numbers saying, look, this isn't working. We've got to change sides.
Yeah, I found this kind of almost comical about the fact that Mossad was apparently calling up generals literally on their cell phones in Iran and saying, look, here's the deal. We know where you are. You either surrender or we're going to kill you. And they would have these very calm conversations with these people. We're going to kill you if you don't give up. Like,
I can just see that they're answering their phone. They're on their mobile phone. They're in their car. They're on the street. And they say, well, you're at the corner of such and such, and we're watching you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something, and I don't even know if it was the last time you were on. It might have been well over a year ago on the show that I have actually repeated a couple times about the fact that that you said you heard through your grapevine that Jeffrey Epstein was connected to Mossad. Have you heard anything about that before or since, or?
I hear it all the time, but we've also heard he's connected to the CIA. We've also heard that he's connected to Russia. There's so much stuff that's come out that, the simple theories about it. I think in fact, he probably was double dealing with everybody.
Yeah.
I don't think he had a single allegiance. I think he was pitting people against each other, using information, blackmailing or whatever it is to be effective. I think he was on all sides. I think he was on his side.
Yeah. Yeah, so do I. I do too. All right, I want to ask you about another thing too, because like you were a CEO for years, and you're a good capitalist. I talked about on this. I did a monologue about a week or two ago that's gotten enormous. The 2 minute short pulled out of it has gotten a lot of hits on both YouTube and TikTok about why I explain why socialism doesn't work in the best economic terms I could come up with, and also the fact that one of the reasons I studying macroeconomics was one of the reasons I basically switched from being a liberal to a conservative. And as a general rule, that has gotten a lot of likes, but also a lot of people, there's been enormous pushback too. Some of the comments were highly negative. How do you explain to people that socialism doesn't work? How do you do that?
Well, we haven't done that. We haven't explained it, and it sounds very romantic. Give equal. Everybody's going to be equal, and give to the people who need it the most, and balance things out. Well, that's great until you actually tell people you're going to take this to give it to somebody else, and so it doesn't work. But that's a case of what we were talking about earlier, the seen and the unseen. I mean, people see the inequities in income, and I won't use the word, I say inequalities in income, and they don't understand how there are mechanisms in place in the marketplace that sort of sort out who's creating the most value for society, and those people end up making more money. And in the end, that creates economic wealth, and in the end, that makes everybody better off. But one of the things on my to-do list is try to figure out a way to explain. And I don't like the word capitalism either, because that was the name Karl Marx gave it, and we're really talking about free exchange, voluntary exchange. And it's a system where everybody has the right to trade with each other, and they can choose who to work with, who not to work with. I mean, now in the United States, you look at an employment agreement between an employer and employee. Well, in between those two are just thousands of pages of regulations about what you can do and what you can't do. And so even the employment situation is not set up so that people are truly free. I don't know. I wish I'm sort of dredging up. I guess the best way you can do it doesn't really explain it, but there's no example of a country who's adopted socialism that's created any wealth and made people happier. In fact,
Right.
It's a misery machine. Look at Cuba.
Yeah. Oh, and that was one of the things I brought up and that people bitched about in this thing. I did bring up Cuba. That's how it started. And I remember one commenter said, "Well, how can you can't blame the Cubans for the fact that we gave them an embargo against oil." And I said, "Well, yeah, you can. They can get oil from all sorts of places. They don't have to get it from us. And even if you talk about the fact that maybe the sanctions go beyond the United States, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you had truly free enterprise or free exchange, you'd have no trouble getting oil from it. So that's bullshit."
Well, freedom though requires effort, and I think that's one of the problems is that freedom's not really a precious commodity among young people. You don't hear them talk about that. You hear them talk about safety. You hear them talk about being taken care of in certain ways, and complaining about. But freedom requires a lot of responsibility to take care of yourself, and I don't think that's being taught as much now, and I know it's not. And so we've lost that gene for freedom, and I don't think we haven't completely lost it, but until you get enough people who want to be free and want to take care of themselves. I know when I was a kid in my 20s, I went to public schools. I didn't have anything, and I sort of adopted the Billie Holiday song, "God Bless the Child Who's Got His Own." And, I wanted to make sure I could take care of myself. And that meant, studying accounting so I could get a job that paid, decent money. And, accounting's not that stimulating. I mean, I certainly like the symphony better, but nevertheless, that's the way you make a living. And you got to make those choices so you can create your independence and therefore your freedom. And that's maybe you and I could work up a curriculum to do that. I'd love to
Well,
give
you
it a
just
shot.
touched on something that I found really fascinating, and that is this thing about safety. This is all of a sudden safety's become a big thing in society, and I don't remember before 20 years ago anybody ever talking about that ever, other than getting raped maybe or something like that. I mean now people are worried about safety regarding everything, and I think it's kind of a feminine construct.
You
I
bet.
don't, you know, I don't. I mean, I don't want to drag you in a sort of sexism thing, but it's feminism is mostly or safety is mostly a feminine thing, and I'm surprised that now it's everywhere.
I think it's such an essential point. There was a woman I had on 5, 6 years ago, who was a researcher at Harvard. Her name's Joyce. I'll dredge up her last name, but she had a great book called Warriors and Worriers. And she's a sociologist, anthropologist, and she studied societies all over the world about the different characteristics between the boys growing up and the girls growing up. And it turns out, if you look at the way that societies get arranged, particularly in hunter-gatherer, and then even beyond that in Africa. Now you've got the men who are the risk takers that go out and hunt the woolly mammoth, and the women who take care of the most important thing is they take care of the children. And that creates a very different risk profile than if you're going out, hunting. They're stay at home, taking care of the kids, and they have to nurture that. And if that translates into laws in society, it means that a society that has more feminine characteristics has fewer risk takers, because over centuries, over thousands of years, that was the behavior that you needed to have. Don't take a lot of risk because you've got to protect, the home hearth. And I'll probably get lots of hate mail for that, but
I will
it's
too.
it's what I believe. So
25 years ago, I worked at a television station. I worked for a woman who was a psychopath, but she said she was nuts. But she said one thing that I remember that I thought was really prescient. She said, if you get men and women together in a room, she said, you get a bunch of men in a room, and the first thing they'll try to figure out is who's in charge. You get a bunch of women in a room, and the first thing they try to figure out is, are we safe? And I thought that was a very, very well put statement, even though she was crazy.
I think that's great. But Joyce would say that not men would figure out who's in charge, but they're also willing to recognize that different men should be in charge of different things. And she talks about sports and how, boys choose teams and they compete and they really fight, but they don't. And maybe they even get into a fight or something like that. But then after that's over, they get over it and they forget about it, and then they move on. And I think it's a much more meritocratic way of thinking about things. And, and also it's a way, it's about if you've got a sports team, you're not caring what color somebody is or what their religion is. You just want to know if they can jump and shoot.
Right. No, it's true. And you were talking earlier about about the fact that part of the thing with socialism is that everyone should be equal, and that's just why does anybody want a society like that? People are not equal. I mean, in terms of and just to use a term like you don't like disparagingly, capitalism. Yeah, I suppose you can make it a point that some people's contributions may not be equitable in terms financially, but the fact that why do you want people to be equal? I mean, people have different strengths and weaknesses, just like you were saying.
Well, they only want to be equal if they're below the below the average. If they're above the average, then they don't really want to give anything up to give it to the people below the average. I mean, it comes down to sort of, do you really mean it? It sounds good as a slogan, but it doesn't work when you're talking about real people, working, exchanging goods, owning assets. I mean, it's, think about that in the real estate world. If you didn't have proper property lines, I mean, we tried that in the United States when the Pilgrims first came over. They didn't have property. They had communal living, and it lasted for
a year.
Yeah.
Exactly a year.
Yeah.
Right. And they changed it.
Yeah.
because it didn't work. And of course, because for them, if it didn't work, that means they were starving, which is they had great incentive to change it, you know?
Well, yeah, a lot of people, what is it? 80-90% of the initial, pilgrims came over, died. I mean, because they tried the system they tried didn't work, and only when they started giving people a little patch of ground to cultivate on their own did it start taking off.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen in the midterms? Got any predictions right now?
I'm almost always wrong. I mean, I can tell what I hope for, but I fear that the only thing that the Republicans would have going for them is the Democrats are led by people like Gavin Newsom, but he's not on the ticket, and so I don't know. I mean, it's not like the Republicans, except for Trump, have particularly distinguished themselves in delivering legislation and all the things they promised in 2024. And so they're going to come back to the voters in 2026. And a lot of people are going to say, what have you done for me? And the economy is not really turned around yet. And so I fear I think we're going to lose the House. I say we, not all your listeners may be Republicans, but I think the Senate's more up in the air. But if the Democrats take over the House, we're going to see 2 years of steady impeachments.
Yeah, right. I know. It'll be completely pointless. Nothing will get done.
And meanwhile, yeah. So I don't know. That's the hardest question you've asked me.
Well, I'll make a prediction. I reserve my right to change it as time goes on, but I actually think right now it's going to end up pretty much the way it is. I actually think the Republicans might keep their slim majorities in both houses. I really do. It'll be razor thin. And if the Democrats do win the House, I think their majority will be razor thin too. I don't think much is going to change really. I mean, obviously you'll have a bunch of races that are going to change, but numerically, I think it'll end up be about the same. That's what I think. That's my 2 bits. I'm sticking to my story.
Open it up then. Hold on a second. Somebody just go and open the door. They'll be fine. We have some dogs that we've been cooping up during our conversation, and they're complaining. They
Put them on camera. What the hell?
They want their freedom. Yeah, they're cute. Hey, Sarah, we'll put them on camera. Yeah. Well, I think the thing about the House is that it's district by district by district.
Right.
Yeah. And if you get somebody charismatic, you can't really do a 35,000.
No, you can't. I know. That's the problem with it. You're absolutely right. I mean, between the House and the third of the Senate, you're talking about 468 different elections.
Yeah.
So it's very, very, but historically, I mean, only 4 times, I think, in American history has the party in power kept, their power over the midterm. So I don't know. I don't understand why that happens either. Do people just get bored or, but it just seems that's the way it works out.
Well, I hate to not sound like I don't believe in democracy, but the problem we've got is so many people are so uninformed about what's going on and what kind of progress we're making, and then their expectations are so oriented towards more immediate gratification. And you and I know if you're setting up a business or doing anything that matter, it can take years. It can take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to begin to see results. And so any policy that Trump puts in place or Congress puts in place, it's going to take some time. I mean, remember Reagan? He had this first 2 years, it was like unemployment was off the charts, inflation was still raging, and yet, after that first midterm, everything turned around, and he just had, the best economy imaginable. But it took time.
Yeah. Well, most presidents, their first year basically ends up being bullshit. I mean, historically, at least in the later 20th century, I don't know, going back to, you couldn't count Truman, but Eisenhower's kind of a misnomer. But it's just a general rule. Most presidents, it takes them a year to figure the job out,
Except Trump point 2.
That's true.
2.0.
He'd already done it. You know,
Well, I think I don't. We talked about it or not, but I mentioned that I was. Let me get rid of this. I worked for him in first term 2 point or Trump 1.0, 2.0, night and day, totally different. I mean, ready to hit the ground running, had the people in place, had Roosevelt draft all the executive orders that he needed, had every single piece of the puzzle. And he realized that if he moves fast and moves at, 53 things a day, it confuses the press. They can't cover it. They don't know how to hit him. And so if he's moving fast on all fronts, you can get a lot done. It's been amazing to watch. Now, the problem is it's not ensconced in legislation, so next president can reverse it. But he made a lot of progress. The only president I can think of that's actually moved like that. Can't think of one. FDR, maybe. FDR, but I was dead. I wasn't alive then.
Yeah, I know. The other thing about FDR, I have economists on the show. Like I've talked to Murray Sabrin about this. I always kind of posited that you look back historically, it's pretty obvious that a lot of the stuff that FDR did as far as the Depression is concerned actually prolonged it. If he actually knew what he was doing, it would have been done over in 2 years, and it took 8. And I said to Murray, I said, well, I just assume that's because we didn't know that much about capitalism 100 years ago and how this whole thing worked. And he said, no, that's not true. It's just that FDR was an ideologue.
It was a power grab. It wasn't really about economics. They wanted to consolidate more power, and so it had very little to do with economics. And macroeconomics. Keynes really wrote that in a way to justify government spending and taxing, because it said, if they spend more money, it'll stimulate the economy. Well, that's not true. But nevertheless, they've been operating with that as their playbook, ever since the 30s.
Yeah, but let me ask you, not a loaded question. I actually don't know the answer to this. You can't save your way to prosperity either, can you?
Well, I'm a supply sider. You've got to give, and I think that's the underpinning of why Trump wants to bring manufacturing back to the United States. If you have an incentive to save and invest in building things and create markets, supply creates demand. I mean, the best example is Steve Jobs when he was developing the iPhone, and there wasn't if you did a consumer survey poll and you say, well, do you want an iPhone? Well, they wouldn't even know what it was, and so there was no demand for it until he created the product. And most of the advances in the economy have come from the supply side. I mean, if you look at the electricity, you look at consumer goods, you look at the cars. Henry Ford created the market for the Model T because he invented this incredibly effective assembly line, and then he also paid the people who worked for him $5. I think $5 a week, $5 a day. I don't remember the number, but they could afford to buy a car.
Yeah,
and nobody could. So no, I think you can save. If you think about saving, just putting it under the mattress, no, that doesn't do anything. But if you think of putting savings in the hands of entrepreneurs who know what to do with it, Katie bar the door. I mean, that's what really works.
I think we'll leave it at that, Bill.
Okay, we could go on.
That's the thing. That's the problem, Bill. We can go on forever. I'm not really with the Joe Rogan method about the 3 hours.
Too long. I don't know how they do it.
I understand how they do it. I mean, you and I could do that. We could do it, but still, no one with a real life wants to. I remember my cousin said he listened to Joe Rogan's or watched Joe Rogan's interview with Donald Trump before the election, and he said he had to sit down 6 times to get through it. Nobody with real life has that much time.
Exactly.
I call them bro shows. If you're 24 unemployed and living in your parents' basement, you have plenty of time to watch that. So
it's a big part of his audience.
You're still doing the podcast, right? You're still doing it.
I am. Yeah, I've done 275. I've been going slow in the last 8 or 9 months. As you know, it's a lot of work. And what was happening was I had a lot of people who were interested in what I had to say more than I would. And my format was very guest oriented, and so what I've been doing is I've been doing some things like we've just talked about, doing some writing, and I'm finding that's really interesting because you can put out 800, 1,000, 200, one 1,200 words, and it resonates. You can get a lot of traction with that. So I'm doing writing right now, and it's on my Substack page and also on my website, and with the idea that that'll translate into audio and video, in the next version of life.
Yeah, well, you see, you got a point here, and that is, your podcast may be guest oriented, but you have more knowledge and proper opinions than most of your guests. Whereas, I got nothing. Which is the reason my show is guest oriented, but the thing is, I have people like you on, and you're brilliant. So make me look good.
I can't say that. I can't say that. Yeah. Well, let's do this again. When I get tea back up again, you got to come on mine, and let's speculate.
I would take you up on that. So you got to think about whether you want to do that for sure.
No. Okay. This is great. Thank you.
Bill, I really, I always enjoy talking to you. You know that. I think this might be your fourth appearance here. I think. I'm not sure.
No, we play jazz. I mean, it's fun.
Yeah, that's right. I know. That's one of the things I like. So I've never told you this. I'm a former classical musician, and one of the reasons I really like this format is because, like that, you just brought it up. It is kind of like playing jazz. It's entirely improvisational. No one knows what's going to happen. And that's my attraction to it. So,
well, yeah, I mean, this is freedom compared to being in a symphony. I mean, those people have no degrees of freedom. I couldn't sit in this orchestra very long. I'd want to sort of pick up the pace or slow it down or change it, and I'd be kicked out of the orchestra in about a day.
Yeah, and you had a point there. I mean, people forget. Well, you're creating music. No, you're recreating the music. You're not creating it. Right. That's the difference. So. Yeah. Anyway, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We continued. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks to Bill Walton there. So, he was saying that he has a problem because he basically knows more than the guests he has on the show. He's both wiser and more experienced. And I'm just thinking, I'm so lucky I don't have that problem. I don't. He wants to have me on his show. Why? I don't know. What do I know? But I am a damn good interviewer for that reason, that very reason. So what the heck? It's Monday, March 30th. You guys know that. And this is the footnotes for tonight. First of all, I have to point this out. The weather in Minneapolis, it's crazy here. Yesterday, it was 72 degrees. Today, it was 72 degrees. On Wednesday, 2 days from now, it's supposed to snow. What the fuck? Jesus. I mean, it's just nuts. Just crazy. But that's what you get. So what happened over the weekend is that there's a media a ruling in the social media trial where Google and Facebook, or Meta, were fined $6 million for because the plaintiffs said they screwed their kids up by addicting them to social media. Now, there's a couple of things that have to be pointed out here, and one, Google's on here because of YouTube. Or Alphabet, actually. It's Alphabet's the name of their parent company. YouTube pointed this out, and this is actually, this has to be addressed. The fact that YouTube is not a social network. It isn't. It's basically replaced television. I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, my wife and I, and a whole bunch of people I know, I basically spend the last 2 hours most nights scrolling through YouTube. It's basically replaced television for a lot of people. It has, but it's not a social network. It isn't. It does not socially network people. It doesn't do that. Now you can make an argument that yeah, it's addictive, but it's not anywhere more. No, I mean, so is television. I mean, people, especially years ago when television was the only thing, people watched television for hours and hours on end. People still do. I'm under the impression that the last thing I heard, and this is quite a while ago, that the average person in America watches television 5 hours a day. Now, I don't know what they consider average, and I'm sure it's way more for older people than it is for younger people who are on the tablet or their phone. But still, all right. So if television's addicting too. So no one's ever sued CBS. So there's that. And then you have to understand too, the award was $6 million. Well, my guess is Facebook makes $6 million in what, 30 minutes? I don't know. It's ridiculously profitable. There's I can say this with quite certainty, and that is Facebook is the single best advertising medium ever devised. I mean, I don't know if you ever tried to buy advertising on Facebook. It's actually quite complex. Most people get an expert to do it. Although, I mean, you can do it. I mean, it's like they have a dashboard and all that sort of stuff, but it's pretty complicated actually. But still, the fact of the matter is the reason people do it and the reason they're so successful is that you can get an enormous amount of bang for their buck. And I got to give them credit. They have not really raised the prices much. It's like you can still get a real good bang for your buck if you know what you're doing. And the thing is about Facebook is that Facebook knows everything about all their users. They know their favorite shows and their favorite music, and they know because you, the public, you told them. Did you have to do that? No. I got off of Facebook years ago. Now, I mean, I've explained this this show is everywhere online. Me, no, I don't post anywhere. I basically have no personal accounts anywhere. There's a few places where to like to put the show up. I have to, but I don't tend to them. I do not engage in social media. But and you don't have to. That's the thing. You don't have to. But people say, "Well, how can you live without it?" Well, it's really pretty simple. It is. Now, granted, I have an outlet here. I'm doing this, so whereas you're posting and all that sort of rot, and that's your outlet. And so, okay, so maybe this covers it for me. But still, I don't. I woke up one morning. I mean, I cannot tell you how I formally engaged I used to be. Around 2010, I don't know the exact date, I woke up one morning and I realized, my God, this is an enormous waste of my time. And I literally just quit that day, that morning. I've never gone back. I came to the conclusion that I was just like, all I was doing was burning up time. And of course, me burning up time means that Facebook makes money. Now, Facebook is a social network. So there's that. And so, the argument is made that the social networks are designed so that you can get a dopamine hit, or the user does, when they see something positive about themselves or whatever, that sort of thing. And are these networks designed to do that? Yeah, they are. At some point, very early in their existence, Mark Zuckerberg and company figured out that, oh my God, there's a psychological component to this that's that's very, lack of a better term, engaging. But I don't see. That's the thing. Yeah, are they manipulating viewers? Yes, they are. But you're the one you're being voluntarily manipulated. You don't have to go on. You don't. So they're going to fight this. That'd be Meta and Alphabet, even though they can afford. I mean, $6 million is a drop in the bucket for these companies. I mean, they would not miss the money at all. I mean, literally, it's what is it? Probably 0.001% of their bottom line or something like that. I mean, both these companies make in profit billions of dollars a year. The $6 million they won't miss, but they're going to fight it on principle. And the thing is, I think they might have a point. As much as I hate this, I hate social media. I've told you this. I don't like to talk about this. I don't want to give you the details. I could make an argument of the fact that I was involved in the development of social media, and I regret my involvement. I think it's done more harm than good to society. But do they make you go on there? No, they don't. I don't know what else to tell you. It's like, no one's making you do this, and I would suggest you quit. Not okay. I'm doing a little internet TV show here, and that's great. And like I said, I don't consider YouTube a social network. It isn't. It's basically a broadcaster at this point. So yeah, I hope you watch my show. I hope you watch my shorts on TikTok and all that sort of stuff. TikTok's an interesting hybrid too. TikTok is kind of sort of a social network, but it still exists mostly to play videos. So it's like they're the only ones too that have truly cracked. I don't understand how their algorithm works, but on TikTok you can truly go viral, whereas most of the viral stuff you heard about online is bullshit. Most of it doesn't happen. Usually there's some marketing firm or some publicity company somewhere behind stuff that you think goes viral. Usually, not always, but usually. I mean, stuff does legitimately go viral, but the stuff that does is a minority. On TikTok, it actually does. Things actually do go viral. I don't know. God bless them. I don't know what they're doing. I haven't figured it out. On the other networks, it's very simple. If something starts to gain popularity, they start to push it. So the more popularity something gets, the more they push, and the more popular it gets. It's a snowball effect. So, and you can pay to have it done. And you can either pay Facebook to boost posts, or you can pay a third-party service to do it. And that's how most of the stuff goes viral. That's how it works. So, Daily Mail ran an article this weekend about the fact that the Trump ballroom that they're building next to and as part of the White House has what they call "quote unquote" humiliating design flaws. Right? All right, and some of the flaws are that, like the steps that on what looks like the what appears to be from the outside, the main entrance of the building is not the main entrance of the building. Stuff like that. Well, today, and I checked just before we went on before Showtime here. And as far as I can tell, only the Daily Caller is reporting this story. No one else is. That the ballroom, it doesn't exist for this reason. They're not building it for this, but the military decided to put a secret underground bunker underneath the ballroom. And that was supposed to be secret. And that's one of the reasons they're actually building it. Trump has said now, this is in retrospect because he's really pissed off because there was one of these groups filed a suit against the White House for building the ballroom, and as part of that suit, they had to reveal the fact that the military is building something underneath the ballroom. And he said that nobody wanted to do this more than the military, and that's the reason they actually went forward. Although he's been angling for this ballroom, and other people have, frankly, for years. But yeah. So you have to understand that on the original East Wing, there was a bunker underneath that too. That was relatively public. FDR built that in the 1940s during the Second World War. And part of the reason is, as in this case, they built the East Wing, the former East Wing, was to hide the bunker underneath it. That was part of the reason. And same thing here. One of the reasons, maybe not the primary reason, but one of the reasons they're building the ballroom is so the military could stick this underground facility underneath it. And this, in the process of responding to this lawsuit, they had to reveal this. And Trump was really pissed off because he said, he said the people who made us do this are not very patriotic, and they aren't. They aren't. This is like there's some things need to be kept secret. So I think the previous facility had a name. It was something called the Emergency Executive something. I can't remember. But yeah, it was basically a bunker for the White House staff in case there was a radiation strike or a bombing or something like that. This was apparently, they're not really revealing what this was. The impression is that it was going to incorporate the use or the functions of the previous bunker, but it was going to be much, much bigger. That they were going to put a facility down there. So anyway, I thought this is the type of thing I like to report on. It's like nobody else is talking about this. I'm going to be curious to see tomorrow morning if other people are talking about it. I've noticed something here. Um, a lot of times, so we get done here around 9:30 Eastern, 10:30 no, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. And the Gutfeld show on Fox News starts at 10 p.m. Eastern. And I have noticed that sometimes, a lot of the times, I will cover a story here in our footnotes, and they will cover it as a topic on Gutfeld like 30 minutes later. Now, it's easy for me to say, I've also noticed there's a lot of stuff that we report here that Fox News will end up picking up the next day. Am I paranoid? No. Do I care? No. Is it flattery if they're picking it up for here? Yeah, it is. I don't think they are. Little old me, I don't think so. But still, I do notice this. I notice this stuff. And this story is exactly the type of stuff I like to talk about here. No one else is talking about it. It's fairly important. I think so. I mean, it's a partial justification for this whole facility, even though the ballroom itself, as Trump has often said, is being paid for by volunteers or donors, excuse me. Although it has been noted that a lot of the donors, some of the donors are defense contractors. So they would be involved in what's going on underneath too. So it's actually worth their trouble to donate to the facility to get it built. So at any rate, yeah, that's what happened. That's going on. Evelyn Lincoln was the personal secretary of John F. Kennedy. Was he the 35th president of the United States, I think? And she said in a book that she did not have published, that was not published ever, but it's the last book she wrote before she passed away. She had 3 books published before during her lifetime, and this was the last one she wrote. But she decided not to publish it and never was. But in this book, with Jefferson Morley, excuse me, not Jennifer, Jefferson Morley of JFK Facts, he went to the archive and actually read this, because if I'm right, Evelyn Lincoln's papers are also included in the JFK archive of papers too. And he said he read the book, her unpublished book is in there, and he read it. And she said that she called the assassination of President John F. Kennedy a professional political murder. And she went down the list of all the people who wanted him dead. And I went down the same list. It's literally about a dozen different organizations within the power structure of Washington, D.C. And I've read the whole thing. The implication is that she thinks maybe the CIA was involved. It was them. It was either CIA or organized crime. Now, I've said my theory is that it was the CIA and organized crime. James Files, the guy who contends that he was the guy who shot Kennedy in the head, said that the CIA hired the Chicago mob to do the job, because technically the CIA is not supposed to work inside the United States. And that apparently is still true. The rumors for years is that if the CIA wants to kill someone inside the U.S., they hire lack of a better term, they hire a third party to do it, because they're not supposed to. And that's supposedly what happened here too. Although Files also says, and there's some evidence to indicate this is correct, that at the last minute, the CIA changed their mind, and Chuck Nicoletti, who was one of the bosses of Chicago, Files very famously quoted him as saying, fuck it, we're going to go ahead anyway. So supposedly, so the CIA then sent some guys to Dallas to try to stop this. They had cold feet, or they just decided, obviously, what they were doing was wrong. And at some point, I guess they came to their senses. But the mob didn't care. The mob wanted Kennedy dead because they were putting him, his attorney general, Robert Kennedy, was putting them out of business. So and not only that, they supported his campaign, and supposedly even maybe fucked with some of the votes in Cook County. So they were really pissed off. And supposedly they were riding on the same plane from Chicago to Dallas. They were riding together. They didn't even know it. two different groups. One's off to kill the president, and one to stop it. And they were on the same airplane. They didn't even know, supposedly. But Evelyn, she says she thinks that that's what. The other thing that came out of this too is that people often said that LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the vice president who succeeded Kennedy as president, was involved in this, and she implies this, doesn't really say it, but I have gathered this. What I've gathered is that he may not have been involved, but he knew about it. He knew about the plot ahead of time because supposedly, and she brings this up in her unpublished book, that at Parkland Hospital, where LBJ went, where Kennedy literally died in one of the emergency rooms there, that people heard him say that he was aware of a conspiracy to do this. He said this apparently at the hospital, and she says this in her book. And that's the impression I'm under too, that he may not have been involved, but he was aware of the fact that was going on and even knew was going to happen. And he wasn't going to do anything to try to stop it because apparently he hated JFK's guts too, and he wanted to be president. So, and that's a really interesting story, man. If you ever look into that, he filled out the last year of JFK's term. He ran for president. He won. And then he very famously decided not to run in, was it 68? Right, in 68. And that was surprised the hell out of everybody. And he left Washington and left it for private life. And basically, apparently he was a psychologically broken man when he left the president. And he died that way 12 years later, if I'm right, after leaving the presidency. He became a recluse for all practical purposes. He did the first year or something, he did a few public events and speeches, but after that, he did nothing, and there's been all sorts of speculation on why that happened. Some people think it's the Vietnam War. Some people think it had to do with the Kennedy assassination, that he maybe didn't literally have blood on his hands, but he went on, I don't know. It's just really fascinating. This guy who literally used to pull his penis out, his giant, enormous penis, to show other people that he was literally the cock of the walk. Literally, he would do this. Basically, retired into recklessness. I don't know. It's just crazy how stuff works. So this has been floating around for a few months now, and I did not read. I should have read. The woman's name is it Bella? I can never pronounce it. She's Hungarian, if I'm right. There's a scientist who came to she grabbed these plates that were used at major observatories in the 1950s. This is all pre-1957. Sputnik was launched by the Russians in 1957. October, if I'm right? And so the point here, she looked through all these photographic plates from different observatories and came to the realization that there was stuff on the plates that could not be accounted for, that were not stars in the sky. And now another person has replicated her results. I mean, it appears, and people have tried to say, oh, it's crazy stuff on the lens. I mean, so you understand, we have nothing in orbit at this point. This is pre-1957. Humans have nothing in orbit around the Earth. There's nothing that should be there other than stars, right? And there's stuff on stuff on the plates that are not stars, and they can tell because the way they move, the way they go in and out of position, the stuff, stars, other than the scan of the sky, stars don't move, and so they found plenty of stuff. And the other thing they found too is that these instances of anomalies, if you want to call them, increased in times and places where there were nuclear tests. Which people in the military have been saying for years and years, and starting in the 40s on down, the first time we launched even at the Trinity site, people said they saw UFOs. That's where they tested the first atomic bomb. They did one test, and then they flew over to Japan and dropped the two. Even at that test, they said they saw UFOs. So, this has been an ongoing thing about in the military for ages about the fact that UFOs have a tendency to regularly show up at sites that are storing nuclear weapons. So anyway, the point here is that this happens. This woman, Bella, starts with a V. She made her announcement several months ago, and I think this guy's actually with NASA. Yeah, he is a NASA scientist. He's a NASA scientist. He has confirmed this. He has independently confirmed the fact that all the stuff she found was true. Excuse me. Well, that's rude. And so here, our friend David Strom was on last week in Hot Air. He wrote this is called the biggest news story nobody's talking about, and State of the Day. They wrote about this about the fact that speaking and I got a segue going here. Speaking of nuclear facilities, that it was the Lockhart Air Force Base, if I'm right, has been inundated with drones. And the problem here is that these drones, and these are regular propeller drones, and that I need to point that out because I'm going to come up with a really, really weird theory here that's really off the charts. But these are regular propeller drones, but they can't figure out who launched them. They seem to be immune to jamming. These are the most sophisticated, technically advanced drones that the Army's ever seen. And they have swarmed this Air Force base where they do keep nuclear weapons, and no one can figure out where they came from. Nobody can figure out who's running them. They can't jam the signals. They have what's called an unusual radio signatures that they can't decipher. The Army is completely at a loss for this. They don't know what's going on, but they are regular drones. They're not UFOs. They're propeller drones. They're a little on the large side, as a lot of military drones are, like they're size of a small car, but they're drones. But here's the deal. This is the part where you're going to call me crazy, and I'm not suggesting this is the probable solution of this, but you do have to consider this, and that is if you're flying across the galaxy to come to Earth, for you to manufacture drones would probably be pretty fucking easy. And you're not going to be suspected, I mean, supposedly, alien abductees have said same thing that I've been saying for years, is that someday we are going to have the replicator in Star Trek, and they're saying that some of these aliens already have it. So basically, they can replicate pretty much anything, in like 30 seconds. So if you want to come down and get information, or you want to scare the bejesus out of the American military, and you don't want to be suspected, what better way than to manufacture a bunch of drones, which of course would be primitive compared to what you got. I mean, this is like, it's just absolutely, you're flying across the galaxy, and here you're talking about propeller drones. They're stupid as far as you're concerned. But yeah, you could do that. That's possible. I have to throw that out. Do I think it's probable? No. But the thing is, they've already ruled out the Chinese, the Russians, and the Ukrainians, because so far, I don't know if you know this, or we've talked about this on the show before. Jonathan Lockwood comes on regularly. The Ukrainians are the best manufacturers of drones on the planet at the present time. They are making the most sophisticated drones, and they make them in quantity. And they said the armies have ruled out all three of those actors, so they don't know who's making them. And these are supposedly the most sophisticated drones the U.S. military has ever seen. So wrap that around your head, And finally, speaking of all that, I have to address this. So the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, he has said that he's obsessed with the UFO situation, and said he promises that they will get to the bottom of it. But he also says this, and he's not the only one, and we've talked about this here before, about the fact that he's not sure they're aliens. He thinks they might be demons. They might be demonic, and it might be a religious phenomena. And he's not the only person who's said that. I've talked about this many times. I mean, our late great friend Chaz Shaw used to come on the show regularly. He was connected with the Pentagon, and there's supposedly a whole wing of people in the Pentagon who thinks this is primarily, that this whole UFO situation is primarily religious thing, that they're demons. Now, I don't want to demean anybody's religious belief, but they might be evil. But it's, now there's a woman. I should have announced this when we started. Louisa Perk's going to come on Thursday, and she's an interesting person. She is a woman who was an atheist in her but in her mid-20s, she went to a rave and had a drug-induced cardiac arrest. And in that process of that, she had a near-death experience. She said she saw God and all that sort of stuff. That's a standard, you know. And even after that happened to her, she discounted it. She said, well, that's just my mind playing tricks on herself. Except what started after that is a whole slew of what she says are paranormal experiences in her life. She went from being a hardcore atheist to what she calls a complete woo-woo. She's our guest on Thursday. And so I don't want to demean anybody's. The thing is, some of this stuff probably is evil, but that doesn't mean it's demonic per se in the sense it's literally the devil either. It doesn't. I mean, as crazy it is, we live in a real world. And you're saying, well, Jim, if we live in a real world where they can't bust the speed of light, well, that's bullshit. We already know how to do that. We just can't do it. That's all. But we know how. And so you're dealing with, the best reports I've ever gotten are that there's a whole slew of species that are coming on a regular basis, and some of them are benevolent, and some of them are simply not. So I'm sure some of this is evil, but the thing is, whether it's actually an entirely religious phenomena, I don't know. I just, I was going to put this in our report tonight, but we're already. I knew we were going to go over time about the fact that there's a bunch of scientists have now. You keep talking about this interdimensional thing, and people say, well, "What does that mean?" It's like the thing is that you can occupy the same geographic space on Earth, and yet there's a whole different world that you don't see. And well, how could you do that? Well, now scientists have through the subatomic particle fermion, they think that maybe the fermion particle has something to do with this extra dimension, and they think maybe it's the first sign they've seen that maybe this might actually exist. So anyway, that's a story right there. I mean, I guess I told it, but anyway, yeah, it's good. It's just really interesting. We'll be seeing what the vice president says in the future. Huh? I want to thank you for watching. Always love the fact you watch. I don't do this enough. Please, if you're on Rumble or YouTube, please subscribe or like or whatever it is. All right, so the rest of the week, we're taking tomorrow, Tuesday night off. And the reason we're taking Tuesday night off is we're putting together a special show for Wednesday, which is April Fool's Day. And for the first time, we're going to have more than 2 guests on our show. I'm not talking about a panel. We're actually having 3 different guests on the whole program, which is the first time we've ever done this. So, and you're saying, well, why are you doing this, Jimmy? It's like, it's not that important. But there's another holiday here, and that is Wednesday, April 1st, is the 50th anniversary of the founding of Apple Computer. Yeah, 50 years, and it's April Fool's Day, both. So we're going to have people talking about all that sort of stuff. So we're putting together a special show, basically, for Wednesday. We're going to see if we can pull it off. And Louisa Perk is going to be with us on Thursday, this author I was just telling you about. Next week, on Wednesday, Lori Broderick is going to be with us, and she is a scientist who deals with time travel. So we're gonna talk to her about whether that can happen, whether that's real, all sorts of those theoretical possibilities. She said, I talked to her and she said, well, you do a lot of speculation on our show. I said, yes, I do, but that doesn't mean you have to, you know, you can stick to the facts. I can do the speculation because I'm so good at it. Any rate. So we had a long show tonight. I hope I didn't keep you guys from your cartoons or YouTube or whatever. If you're watching this on YouTube, just go watch some music videos. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are, and good night to you, wherever you may be. Once again, we're taking tomorrow night off, but we'll be back with a special show on Wednesday night, April 1st. Take care, everybody. We'll see you.